What's up, everybody? It's your boy Logan. Welcome to another episode of the Dink Show. Before we get started with the show, I want to talk about the community we are building at Clarity. This is a community where ideas become reality. Whether you want to just start a community that invests in different NFTs, or be a launch pad that funds innovative DeFi projects, or even if you want to be a community that funds the purchase of luxury real estate, or maybe even you just want to start a campaign to raise $1,000 to clean up your local park. We have all these types of DAOs in our ecosystem, and we meet every Fridays. So come, join the madness, get involved in the Discord, and we can't wait to make all of our ideas become reality. So let's get into the show where I'm talking with my good friend LC, and she is a Web3 lawyer. I hope you guys enjoy.
What's up, everybody? This is Logan. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Dink Show. Today is a conversation with LC. LC is a lawyer in the blockchain space, and we have a chat about how she got into blockchain, what types of projects she typically works with, why she thinks operating as a DAO is a competitive advantage in some ways, and also what jurisdictions and corporate structures are friendly for DAOs. So I hope you guys enjoy, and thanks again for tuning in. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Dink Show. Today, I am with my friend Laura. Laura is a lawyer in the Web3 space, and I'm excited to ask her some questions and get her perspective on a lot of different things that can be helpful for people creating and participating in DAOs. So the first question I'll have for you, Laura, is, just tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your background? What do you do? What's your story?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Logan, for having me on the show. I appreciate it. So I am Laura LC Cole, and I'm a Web3 blockchain attorney, which that means I'm just helping startups, right? All these projects are really just startups in the really early stage, either in an MVP or just ideator sector. And even in those stages, you need help navigating the legal aspects of whatever you're building. So I'm at a law firm called International Blockchain Legal, where we specialize in distributed ledger technology companies, because there are a number of nuanced areas of law that you have to pay attention to because of the digital asset involved in a lot of blockchain projects. But ultimately, I'm just a tech startup attorney who's just trying to help people navigate this new and innovative space that we're in. And then I do a lot of speaking engagements across the globe as well. I got to travel a lot last year and meet a lot of people and talk about the regulatory aspects of this burgeoning technology, which is pretty great. So between my lawyering and speaking, it's quite an interesting job to have.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. That in this space, there really is it's hard as a founder or someone who wants to start a project in this space to understand all the hoops you have to jump through from a legal perspective. So, people like you really do help us people with big dreams for our startups to really get it off the ground. So kind of double clicking on that a little bit, what kind of projects in the blockchain space do you help? Are they DeFi protocols? Are they DAOs? What do you see the most coming to your doorstep?
I think at my firm, I see a lot of projects that are at the point where they're ready to get listed on the US exchange. So we do a lot of non-security token opinions and such. And when I'm out in a space talking, like I think we met at a Upstream's DAO-a-thon event. So that's like really initial stage companies that I, tend to help out on through my personal law firm outside of my larger one. And so I see a lot of DAOs that are trying to navigate how to create a legal wrapper for protections depending on the jurisdiction they're in. I see a lot of NFT projects that are trying to launch an NFT, and that gets really tricky because you need terms and service. If you're buying an NFT or launching an NFT and they don't have terms of service on the website, that's very suspect, because you don't really know what you're buying and there's no guarantees to it, and it'll default to like a lot of laws that you may not want applying. So NFT projects, I think, are the ones that get launched the quickest, but also the ones that miss a lot of opportunities for protections that should probably be there. there's DeFi protocols. Those are, or any layer one, really, like people that are launching the true foundational tech for stuff to get built onto it. That's a lot of what we navigate in terms of like advisory stuff, where it's like, hey, this is a bigger lift, so you kind of have to piecemeal your advisory as you go and as it grows, and what you really need to cover and when. So it kind of ranges. There's not one specific area of blockchain that's like we're seeing come to us. I mean, gaming's kind of been popular this last year. We've seen a lot more gaming clients try to navigate how their tokens work, but DAOs are still ever popular because I think people are trying to figure them out and make the most of them. I think we have yet to really tap into the power of DAOs, and I'm excited to see where that goes. And then, we're going to always still see some NFT projects, even if they get labeled something different in the future, but it'll still be that digital asset partnered with art or something that'll get you access to something, and all those still need the same thing. You need some legal wrappers, which are just like protections and letting you know what jurisdiction you're operating in and the rules and how you're complying in that jurisdiction, and a little bit of KYC to the government saying like, oh, this is my project, this is my business, I'm in charge here. You need IP protection, whatever you're building. I mean, there's a lot of open source. I love the space that we're in because it's a lot of open source stuff. So there's trickier ways to navigate the IP and open source, because to what extent does what you're building become, something that you've truly innovated, or have you truly just borrowed all of this in like an open source setting? So that's a little tricky. And then there's the IP of like, you did art, or, maybe this governance is so specific, or whatever true benefit people are getting, there might be some intellectual property in that you need to protect, or the brand, like you're creating a brand and that needs to be trademarked because this brand is going to be, pervasive, and you don't want anyone stepping on your toes there. So really, if it's in the distributed ledger technology space, whether it's hardware, software, layer ones, layer twos, bridges, DeFi, NFT, DAOs, we've kind of touched on pretty much all the aspects of it, at least at my firm, if not me personally.
Yeah, definitely. So I think within our community, the Clarity community, the project that I work full-time on right now, there's always questions about legal wrappers and jurisdiction. So I want to tap into that and pick your brain about that a little more. What jurisdictions do you see as good for DAO incorporation, and what types of legal wrappers are good for which use cases?
Those are some great questions, and I'm going to preface it in the most annoying way possible by saying none of this is legal advice, and also it depends. So I think what your legal wrapper should do in theory is just protect, and a legal wrapper in theory or in spirit is there to let you avail yourself of a jurisdiction and KYC yourself to that jurisdiction to let them know you're operating, so that if you are a bad actor, that jurisdiction is like, oh no, we know who's in charge. This was a bad product and people got hurt. That's the principle behind legal wrappers. The second principle behind legal wrappers is those 4 people, or those 2 founders, or that one founder can put things into a legal wrapper and say, to the extent that this is related to this business, that's the extent of my liability, broadly speaking. I mean, you can't like be malicious, or, there's things that you can do that it would penetrate to personal liability, but generally speaking, the point of you wanting a legal wrapper is protection, to limit your involvement or your exposure to just relating to that operation. So if I run, a car manufacturing company, and I'm making millions over there, and then I want to start like an NFT project that has nothing to do with cars, and this NFT project flops and I'm overextended, I don't want those bankruptcy people to come after my hugely successful car manufacturing over here, because it's unrelated. So it's that kind of legal separation that lets you garner some protections that you wouldn't otherwise have. Because what people don't realize about DAOs, I was just on a call the other day with a client who was like, well, I just thought we didn't need a legal wrapper because it was just a bunch of people working on some stuff together, and like, that's not really anything, so there's no exposure there. And I'm like, yeah, you're working on like a project, or I just don't like calling them projects. Like whatever it is you're building, it may start as like an idea or a project or something, but like ultimately it could be a small business. Like you're a startup, you're an entrepreneur, you're a startup. This is a business because there's money to be made. And if there's money to be made, it's a business, and the government in any jurisdiction that you're looking at is going to care about it. So if thinking of it like I'm an entrepreneur, this isn't just an idea, this could be an actual business, would help. Because even if you are just a collective of people sharing ideas, if any of those ideas have any sort of runway to them, now you might need to protect that idea. That's IP. And you're going to need a legal wrapper for that, because that collective, whoever's working on stuff, by default, in the US at least, will be considered a general partnership. So if you have one person in the US that might pull your collective into US jurisdiction, now you're a general partnership, and that's joint and several liability for all members equally. That means that can get scary in a shared wallet situation, because going back to like a bankruptcy example, if I have a shared wallet, I mean, this is obviously generally speaking, but this is why it matters in the worst case scenario. If I have a shared wallet and I have a bankruptcy claim against me and I don't have a legal wrapper, then that general partnership's shared wallet is available to my bankruptcy liens. And they can just dip into it, because this is not protected. That general partnership means all of that is mine as much as all of it is the next guy's. So if I need to drain it, I can. Even if we need a multi-sig, even if you can put a lien on that. That's like your worst case nightmare scenario, but that's kind of like in theory what you're trying to protect by not being a general partnership. And that's your default in a DAO situation when you haven't put just a small legal wrapper on it. The problem is, at least in the US, when you put a legal wrapper on something, now in spirit, you're not a DAO, because there's a mind and management. There's a core team that's deciding for this group, because they're the ones that are KYC'd on that document. Unless you're in a true DAO and you're like, look, this DAO is 12 members. Each member has the same amount of votes, and each member is listed on those incorporation docs, so the operating agreement for the LLC or for the C Corp. If everyone is listed and KYC'd and part of it in terms of their legal wrapper, if they're listed on it, then yeah, you might still be in spirit a DAO too. But like, as you know, DAOs can be huge. Like writing out a 2,000 member DAO just for equality purposes might not be best. So then what you have is like a core team, a mind and management, who's kind of sitting as that legal operator of that entity. And then you have your governing docs of the DAO that kind of operate and dictate how the DAO works. But ultimately, it's those 4 people that are going to be on the hook and in charge, which makes it less DAO-like. But I don't think that's a problem right now. I think in this space, nothing is binary. Like, as much as we love our code, right? Nothing's truly binary, right? So everything is a little gradient. And then it's like, here's a pure DAO structure. Like, MakerDAO is like a pretty pure DAO structure where it's able to remain pure. I haven't noticed any legal wrapper for them that I'm aware of, but I also haven't really dug into it. But in spirit, like, everything truly does kind of operate on chain and executes on chain, and there's not much change happening or mind and management decisions on the back end. But then you have like your social DAOs, which are like, they're not really doing business necessarily, but they probably do have a legal wrapper just to hold the IP. And that's like, it's all a gradient where it's like nothing's purely in one box or another, because we're pushing these lines and we're figuring out along the way.
Yeah, I think oftentimes we talk about as a DAO, you're somewhere on this like centralized to decentralized spectrum. You fall somewhere in here. You might be more centralized because you have in the early part of your DAO, because you have a core team that is like some labs entity that oversees the operations of the DAO. But the community of the DAO understands that there's a core team that makes decisions based off the governance that the bylaws of this labs entity kind of spell out for the community. That's kind of how I see it happening a lot with the startup stuff that I'm in touch with.
I think it makes sense, especially if you mention like pre-launch, pre-formation. Like, there's phases to a DAO, right? Before you can really like set that ship a sail and like see what it's made of, you've got to
Yeah.
curate it in some way. And in curating it, you've got to curate the community, you've got to curate the ethos, you've got to curate what's really
Hmm.
happening in terms of operations. And
Yeah.
so when I talk to like companies or when I talk to projects, I'm always telling them, especially because money is so tight, right? Like you're not going to be able to just go and say, like, if you want to launch a huge token that has a lot of legal implications, that's going to require you to be like offshore and onshore and have all these elements, like that's a huge legal bill. That's a nightmare,
Hmm.
right? But what you might not be able to afford then, you can still do something today, right? Like you have to constantly be checking in on how far along you are, what you're doing, and reassess your like your legal needs, your accounting needs, your business development needs. Like these are, as you build, you've got to reassess and rebudget as you're starting to grow, because
Hmm.
most things can be corrected if you do them wrong. I mean, unless you're just super blatantly flying in the face of like obvious regulations, there's a lot of mitigation you can do that while it would have been great to just do it right and cheaper in the first place, you can fix later just like a little bit more pricier. But maybe you have the funds then because now that's a problem you can afford to have, kind of thing.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, the DAO space is ever changing and innovating right now, and I think there's a lot to discover. You mentioned it earlier in the call. Like I don't think we've really figured out DAOs yet. I don't
Not at
think we have
all.
either. I think, DAOs are this new concept, this new organizational structure that can be so unique for each different use case, that we're still trying to figure out. The government's trying to figure out how to regulate them.
Yeah.
We're trying, like the entrepreneurs are trying to figure out how to operate them. The community is trying to figure out how to participate in them. The tool builders are trying to figure out what tools DAOs need to operate. So it's a young space, but I think it has a lot of potential.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I guess building off of that, what do you see as some advantages of a company or community operating as a DAO? Why would you want to have a DAO instead of a C corp, or why would you want to use a DAO instead of a different method of creating a community or group or something like that?
Yeah. So I think, well, I have very strong opinions about this, like personally, just as I see it, understanding the business world as I do and the legal world and like what I'm seeing in this innovative space. I think DAOs as an alternative to business is just kind of a failing idea in general, because DAOs are great when you have a myopic decision. DAOs are great for a few different things. When you have a myopic decision, like a singular focus, right? DAOs are great. A corporation inherently has to be a dynamic business making machine that requires that business making to be made on multiple levels, that the democratized DAO situation maybe isn't the best supporter of
Hmm.
inherently, right? But if you have a very singular focus, and my favorite example is Constitution DAO.
Yeah.
It had one focus, and while it's not the greatest idea to go into an auction with your max price, transparent, it showed us the true power behind quickly organizing many, many, many people across all different sectors with financial incentive for one purpose. And then when that purpose wasn't made, you have this great thing where there was this speculation, right? Like there was governance in place for kind of if we win, if we don't win, what do we do? How, as a collective, how do we move with this purposeful fund, right? And so after it didn't work out that you could buy the Constitution, those token prices didn't drop. They actually became a little bit more expensive because it was based on the idea of speculation of what else will this group buy and will it be valuable. So like shared tokenization of something as a DAO could be very powerful. But I think we should take it a step further. I think DAOs as an alternative to collective bargaining in general could be so powerful, because what didn't work about unions? It's corruption, it's money laundering, it's all this backroom, backdoor
Hmm.
mistakes that were made. DAOs could solve with its inherent nature of like transparent, self-executing movement of
Hmm.
money. I mean, that's a really powerful use case for DAOs that no one's really tapping into, except for there was a couple ideas I saw at the DAOathon that really excited me. Like, why
Mm-hmm.
aren't we using collective groups to get better health insurance rates for people that are gigging? Like,
Yeah.
why don't we have DevDAO collective bargaining for like health insurance or different perks elsewhere
Mm-hmm.
when we're all doing the same type of work? You know,
Yeah.
there's a lot of things that we could be doing in terms of like collective bargaining and similar use cases. I think
Yeah.
inside of a corporation, DAOs could be a really great incentivizer for groups that are trying to innovate. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're Google and you've got all these different divisions and you have a division that's trying to do really creative things that are hard to track in terms of big corporate tracking. Like, I'm in a spreadsheet and I did X amount of hours today. That's not really going to help you when you're innovating a different sector of your company. But if you set that sector up as a DAO where people get bounties and they put in their time different ways and they earn stuff and they can decide as a group how to govern or what direction to move because this is working or this test isn't working. That's a really creative employment of a DAO within a system that's like kind of strict and rigid and doesn't support innovation.
Yeah. Yeah. You said so many things that resonated with me there. So I think and dream about DAOs pretty much every day, all day. And
That's
there's
great.
the first one you brought up, the Constitution DAO. So that's kind of this DAO where it's, it's a one purpose DAO. Hey, we're starting this DAO to do this. After we do this, like there's no plan after that. So that's like a clear use case for a DAO. It can happen and it's so powerful to bring everyone from all different corners of the world into something. And then the last example you talked about, how I would kind of describe it as like a corporate innovation DAO. So
Yes.
you have your structure, but on the side of your structure, you have a DAO where it's like, hey, we'll pay, $20,000 to anyone who can solve this problem. And then like anyone who's in this DAO can come in and have a hack at it. I think that's a pretty cool use case. And then the last use case that I think is pretty cool is donation-based organizations.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Ukraine DAO.
you have
Look
these
what they're
charities.
doing. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can draw transparent donations from anyone and anywhere in the world, and these people that donate can have a transparent look at how these funds are spent. And I think that matters to a lot of people.
It does matter. The only trick with that is there's a lot of rules, at least in America, when it comes to fundraising. Because I think a great use case would also be like donations for philanthropy, but also like lobbying. Why aren't we finding a way to put politicians on chain so I can see exactly where my money and influence is going? Because that'll make you more accountable to me and just serve the system a little bit better ultimately. But there's a lot of KYC that has to be done that like this decentralized world does not love. So I think that one will be a little trickier.
Yeah, that one will be trickier, but I'm actually, at college, I had a professor in my public policy class. I'm actually talking with him next Friday about DAOs funding political parties.
Wait, is this in South Florida?
No, it's gonna be one of
okay.
these. It's gonna be one of these episodes. So I'm gonna be doing the same thing I'm doing at the
exciting. I was talking to a professor at FAU about doing DAO fundraising for politicians, like lobbying type stuff. Yeah.
I think it's like, why isn't there a political party where people can donate and they can see, okay, they're going to fund this initiative, or like, I don't know. I have my opinions on things, but I think it could be a cool way to fund a political party that's transparent and people can trust more.
Yeah, no doubt.
So we're coming up on time here. I like to keep these somewhat short so that people don't have just a super long video to watch. My last question for you is going to be, what kind of drew you to the blockchain space, and why do you think it's an important technology?
Oh, that's such a good question. So curiosity has always been the biggest driver for me and the most successful paths I've taken in life. I think everyone, if they just follow their natural inclinations and curiosity, would serve this whole universe a lot better than trying to force themselves into something that they think they should be doing or whatever. So I got into blockchain because I was into the stock market. I was a diamond-handed GME holder. And then I naturally got led over to like the crypto market because there's a lot of crossover between those GME chats and crypto. So I kind of bled into crypto that way. And because I was in South Florida, it was easy for me to like look up some companies and then see that founder or the CEO of that company speaking at like the lab or Mine's Cowork or some coffee shop. And I was like, oh, well, that's worth the drive for me. Like, let me get down to Miami and meet these guys. And the more I engaged with the community, the more the community was so supportive of my curiosity and the like natural skills I brought as an attorney, where people are like, oh, you can write? Like, help me write this white paper. So then, you just start jumping on things. And I think that's the other great thing about the Web3 space is that it just encourages active participation and it doesn't hold your like initial ignorance against you. So it's like, well, I didn't know about blockchain. They're like, that's all right. Read this resource and then help me figure this out because you know how to write better. And I acknowledge that I don't know how to do that. So like, let's get you up to speed so that you can start doing this too and better and help me. And I think that's really special about the blockchain space is that if you just, have enthusiasm and have curiosities and are willing to just like get your hands dirty right away, people will help you learn so much so fast, and they're so encouraging.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Last question is, do you know what's going on with this staking stuff in DC?
Yes.
I feel
Okay, so
I feel like it's a hot topic everyone might want to hear about.
Yeah, it's a hot topic today for sure. I think I've only seen glimpses of it, but it comes down to Coinbase might be the next one to take the hit because Kraken is getting cracked down on for staking, and Coinbase is probably the next one to get cracked down on because they seem to be strongest with their staking positions. I mean, I feel like every day I log in and they're like, you can stake this token now. And that's a little challenging if the SEC is going to go hard into whether or not that deems them inappropriate. What they could do, the easiest fix would just be like only accredited investors could stake. But then there's so much KYC involved in like who's an accredited investor, and ultimately is that like a good business decision? Because like how many users of Coinbase.com are truly accredited investors to make staking worth it? So there's definitely going to be a lot of opinions and probably a lot of back and forth trying to work with the SEC on getting to a better resolve here. But I mean, this is not a great tone to start off with in terms of like how Kraken's going to have to deal with that. But I think that Coinbase is a little better positioned to come out stronger and hopefully leverage some stuff, get us to a better answer here.
Yeah, there's not too much legal clarity in our space, is there?
Yeah, we're making best arguments, but there is some, but then we get confusing complaints from the SEC, like the two guys from Coinbase who were dealing with the insider trading. The SEC recently slapped them with another complaint, and they're using that complaint as kind of a way to say that all these tokens are securities, not commodities. And that's really bad rulemaking. Like that's rulemaking by way of like legal, like criminal proceedings essentially, and that's a terrible way to make law, first of all. And that's just not a good look on the SEC. So their attorneys are coming back hard saying like, this isn't, unacceptable. This is kind of an inappropriate argument to make. And also this isn't an effective argument to make because these tokens are clearly not securities for these reasons. They're taking an interesting approach. They're saying this isn't a security because there's no contract between the initial developer and the users that are buying from a secondary market. So that's actually like a really creative argument to say there's no contract, because these tokens generally get considered a security or non-security based on the definition of investment contract under the law. And so these attorneys have taken it upon themselves to make the argument that there's no contract implied here because the developer of the token can't foresee and does not have a relationship with a buyer on a secondary market that they're not privy to. That's kind of interesting, at least overall.
That is interesting. I think we're starting to see more and more kind of precedent set and case studies to look at in this space as time goes on, as legitimate businesses start building on top of blockchain. So we'll see how it progresses. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. If anyone needs to reach out to me, I'm Learned Chaos on anything with the username, Twitter, Insta, Telegram, Learned Chaos, all one word. Thank you so much for having me, Logan. This has been cool.